when it comes to vibe coding games with AI, people will say that it's too difficult to get started. Other people might instead say, yeah, no matter what you do, you're never ever going to get good results. But in today's video, I'm going to show you that it is actually easy to vibe code game, and you can actually get really good results if you know how to do it. This is a Final Fantasy Tactics inspired game that I've been working on since the last week. This is a fully 3D map environment. My characters can move all around the map, and I've added range combat as well. If I want this character to be able to attack, I can just spin this camera around so that I get a good angle, and here we go, he attacks. The AI also plays a role, acting like a human player, and is able to take its turn. This all started out pretty simple last week, starting out with something as simple as this, but now the graphics have improved, there are a lot more systems, and I'm going to show you today exactly how I built this cutscene feature and how I implemented these portrait images with Nano Banana 2. I'll show you my complete workflow of how to vibe code games using both Claude Code as well as Codex. And the things that I'll be covering are how you do planning with both GPT 5.2 and the newly released 5.4 as well, and how you can use the AskUserQuestions tool that exists both in Codex and Opus so that you can get the best possible plans. And something that not a lot of people know about is how you can actually use queues and interrupts to steer Codex while you're implementing it. And this is extremely handy when you're working on multiple features at the same time. I'll show you how you can automatically test and fix any bugs that occur thanks to Playwright. I'll also cover all the little tips and tricks as part of my workflow that I use whenever I'm vibe coding games. So if you want to know how I go about building games using these techniques, this is the episode for you. If you want some of the skills, prompts, and resources from today's tutorial, I've made them completely free as part of my Insiders Club. I also send out weekly emails with tips, workflows, and early access and previews to all the stuff that's coming up. And if you want to go deeper, check out builderpack.ai. It includes my entire vibe coding workflow, configurations, agents, skills, commands, and basically all of the resources and source code from all of my videos that you see on YouTube. There's also a private Discord community where I share some exclusive updates and where other vibe coding builders hang out. And soon to come will be a new additional resource specifically on AI game development, so topics like what you're seeing in today's video. And so this will be landing soon and the price will be going up. So if you log in today, you will automatically get hold of it and more at today's price. Link is in the description below. And without further ado, let's get started with today's video. So let's get started with what we are going to do first. So just a quick run through. We've gotten pretty far in this game, very inspired by tactics. So you see I can move and over here, okay? And then I can just wait, set my direction that I want to. And same thing for this range character over here as well. We have this full 3D rotational camera, and I'm just going to do the attack here, okay? And now you will see that one of the key differences here is that the AI acts like a human player. So he doesn't just attack immediately. There's actually like a turn system that it respects right now. So I'm going to walk over here one more time, and then I'm going to attack this enemy over here. As I said, everything is working fine now, but there's a few things that I will be implementing. So the best way to take a look at this is I'm going to swap over very quickly to the game of Final Fantasy Tactics over here. If I play this at the moment, you will see that the game has pretty nice portraits over here, all right? And even though most of the functionality is very similar to what we do have, you can see that the portraits show up much nicer. Right now, it uses the sprite sheet, okay? So that's the first thing we're going to do. We're going to implement a very simple feature, really. Just going to implement portraits so that it looks better. So what I'm going to do is very quickly show you what I've done. Here are the portraits of the enemies that I've created. So I've got this male character for the Lancer. This is the female character. And then we got 3 ninjas over here. Okay. I use Nano Banana 2, not Pro, but 2, which has recently been released by Google. And the way that I went about doing it is very simple. So this is Nano Banana 2, and then you can get it from AI Studio. Do note that it's a paid model, so you will need to attach your API keys to be able to make use of this. So I went through a pretty simple process of doing this. So what I first did was I went into Gemini and I said, what would you describe the style of Final Fantasy Tactics portraits? And then it did this analysis. So you would say is that it has a noseless aesthetic, muted earthy palette, detailed grounded fashion, etc., etc. And you can see that's how the portraits do look in Final Fantasy Tactics. If you look at the sprite sheet that I'm using in the game, so this is the one over here, and I just took the idle one, and I'm just gonna zoom in. So it's just this, all right? I went ahead and pasted this into Nano Banana 2. You can see here. And then I said, given this sprite sheet of a pixel art character, create a square-shaped 1:1 aspect ratio portrait of what the character would look like. And then I took aspects of what Gemini took as the description, and then I just pasted in here, and I just cleaned up a bunch of stuff. And you can see it's done pretty well. It gave me this character that you see over here, and then I just went ahead and asked it to create a female character using the other sprite sheet. I did the same thing for the enemies. Okay, so here we have them. Okay, you can see that they are freshly generated. I haven't even committed it yet. So what I'm going to do now is actually integrate this. I'm going to show you step by step how I do this. This is the process that I use whenever I'm doing something like this. Okay, now I'm going to jump into my terminal over here. So I'm using Ghosty, and you'll see that I tend to use both Codex and Claude Code. All right, and you'll see the reason why very shortly. What I'm going to do right here, right now, is I'm going to focus purely on Codex, and then I will use Claude Code for a different task. In short, you should use both if you can. They have strengths. There are a lot of people out there who say one's worse than the other, and etc. But to be honest, like, why choose between the both of them when you can use both? Okay. So the first thing you want to do whenever you're doing a task like this is that switch over the model, and I like to use 5.2, and I like to use high. Okay. And the reason for this is that I'm not going to ask it to implement anything just yet. What I want it to do, first of all, is to look at the portraits, and then I want it to create kind of like an index that will allow us to know that these portraits exist and tie it in with the code base. And because this task, I get this question quite a lot, like, why don't I just use 5.3 Codex right away over here? And the reason for that is that this is really good for coding, but when it comes to things like looking at images or thinking creatively, or even things that are more to do with organization, I tend to use 5.2, and I tend to use this more for planning. Okay, so that's the first thing you want to do, make sure that's high. And then the other one that you want to do, or at least I always do, is that make sure I use full access because I don't want to get prompted all the way. You can also do this in permissions and do full access over here. So for those of you who have seen other videos in this channel, what I always do is that I have something called an asset index.json, and I'll just show it to you right over here. So this one is effectively a single file that tells me all the different assets that I have in the game, and important things around like the frame counts, the size of the images, whether it's an animation. And in this game particularly so, because of the fact that there's so many animations and they're all coming from different asset packs, right? And they all face in north, south, east, west, and all that kind of stuff. It's really important that the AI has a good understanding of where all these things are rather than it having to traverse it every single time you make a request. So that's why we're creating this assets index JSON. Okay, so this asset index JSON is over here. All right, so the first task that we're going to do is we're going to say, I have added full portraits into the public folder. What we're going to do next is create and update the assets index.json file. And so that we understand these portraits and where they map to. The goal is that we want to use these portraits and map them to the characters within the game as part of the panel that comes up when they are selected. Okay, so you can understand, like, this is not really a coding task, right? This is more of in some ways, a planning, a creative task. And that's the reason why I like to use GPT 5.2 for this. Shift tab to go into plan mode. Okay, and as far as possible, you always want to be doing this. And I'll show you the reason why. This helps to effectively avoid a lot of mistakes that would occur if you just jump straight into it. Okay, all right, so I'm just going to kick this off right now. And you will see that what the end result is that we want this to effectively update this assets.index.json with a notion of what these portraits are. I've already named them, so that makes sense. And the idea here is that we want this to be the canonical place where it knows where the assets are. Okay. All right. So right now it will say that it's found the existing manifest. Okay. So it understands what the asset index.json, and then it's taken a note of that. And then it says that there's already existing code that does this portrait frame, right? And this is exactly what we saw earlier. If I jump back into the game, if I just wait for this to be over, you can see when it's selected, the camera moves down, and it's currently using this sprite from the game, which was a placeholder, but we want the portraits to resemble a little bit more of what we see in Final Fantasy Tactics. All right, this will go ahead and it'll study the assets, and you will see that as part of this, all right, and you can see as part of this, what it's doing is that it's actually created a Python file, all right, to look through the assets index.json and then look through all of the images, understand their sizes, and effectively get a good understanding of what these are. And like I said, this is not specifically a coding task. This is really about understanding what assets we have. It's in some ways, a multimodal task. And therefore, using GPT 5.2 is quite appropriate for this. The other thing that I didn't do, as I noticed here, is that it went to medium. I thought I did GPT 5.2 high. You generally want to use high where possible, especially now that Codex has given you twice the number of limits until April. So make use of the added compute that they've given you so that you can have better results. All right, so whenever you're in plan mode, within Codex especially, it will tend to ask you clarifying questions as you see over here. And that's really important because these clarifying questions help it to avoid the mistakes that it might make earlier. Okay, so the first thing it says that, where should the new full portraits be used once we wire them in? So this is like thinking forward, right? So we want it to be everywhere, right? So the selector panel, enemy hover panel, the turn order. And this is what it's talking about, is that if you see in tactics, they use the portraits on the left-hand side as well as over here. And so we also want the same effect, right? We want us to replace it over here as well as over here. And I'll just show you how it works with the enemies at the moment. So if I say, click on that, you can see the enemy is there. It's quite clever. It's already identified that it needs to do that. So I'm going to say everywhere. And then how should the enemies portraits map to the enemies? And so we're going to say enemy one is just the first one, second one, and third one. And then that's exactly, what it does. So like I said, right, when you're using 5.3 Codex, you probably would have been able to get this as well. But I tend to find 5.2 is really good at looking at like kind of the meta aspects of the game, and especially when you're not yet coding. So those are the two clarifying questions that are needed. And this is really important. I know that now in Codex, I think with the latest release, you can invoke the AskUserQuestion tool, which is exactly what you saw over here, even if you're not in plan mode. All right, you can actually create skills that will ask for questions. I haven't tried it out myself, but it's super useful. It's definitely working for plan mode, so you should definitely use it. And this is the reason why you always want to start with a plan. And you see the proposed plan coming up right over here. All right, so just really quickly, you don't really have to go too much into detail. All right, so the summary is that it's just going to update the assets index, include the portraits registry for all of the new images, and then it will determine and then it will basically map it to the characters, and then the enemies will have their portraits, okay? And this is like the implementation details and the key changes that are going to be here, so I'm just going to run through them, and then it talks even about how it's going to test this, okay? What you can do now is that you can just click implement this plan, and it will say switch to default and start coding, means you change to the default model, but I don't usually do this, and I'll show you why, all right? So I'm going to say no stay in plan mode, and then I'm going to actually shift tab out of plan mode. And the reason why I do this is that I am trying to make sure that the steps that I take to build this game, that I'm actually saving it as I go along, okay? And there's many ways that you can do this. You can make this automated, but I like to be a bit in control over what I am prompting and what plans I'm using. The first commit to this repo was a week ago, actually, all right? And I just added the skills in, and I've actually come this far pretty much in a week. It hasn't taken a lot of effort. You can get really far with little pockets of time because of the power of AI. Okay, but like I said, the main thing that I've been doing now is that every time I do something, I will save the prompts. Every single prompt that I use as part of this project, I'm saving, so that when I share this as part of my incoming drop to builderpad.ai, which is the game development resources, I want people to be able to have, exactly what I did to get to this stage. So you can see I did it for the bug fixes, the combat, the gameplay, even the Git commands that I use. It's all saved here. Every single plan that I've gotten to implement it, it's all here. The idea here is that you can replicate everything that I've done in order to get to this stage. And the idea here is that I'm just trying to demonstrate that you don't need coding knowledge. You don't need specialist knowledge. You can pretty much just follow along of what I'm doing with the text prompts and get to where I am pretty easily. And I actually did this on my mobile phone. So you should see my last video where I showed how I basically built the original state of this for my mobile phone, right? I was on the train, I was just like sending prompts. So this is what I like to do before I go and implement. And then now it's time to implement. Okay, so I'm going to do model, and then I'm going to switch it to 5.3, and I'm going to use high. Okay, and you generally want to stay here. You have 78% context left, more than enough to implement this plan. So you don't have to clear your context. And all we have to do now is just say implement this. Okay, and this is the process that I use to implement new features in any project that I do. And there are a lot more advanced ways that you can utilize this process. So I tend to actually have multiple windows open. This allows you to pretty much work on multiple features in parallel without it conflicting to one another. But I'll save this for a separate video. right now I'm just focusing on my like step-by-step iteration process. When I'm working on a game like this, right, or working on any demos or working on my apps, it's the exact same process. Whether you're using Codex, whether you're using Cursor, whether you're using Claude Code, it's always the same, right? Plan with a thinking model, and then write the plan out, write the prompts out, and then you go and implement, okay? The other thing that I tend to do is I have something called the learnings folder. So whenever I finish the implementation, usually there will be some bugs, right? Sometimes it gets it right the first time, but if there are bugs, I go through an iterative process of fixing this, move this here, move this there. And then I say, please write your learnings to this learnings folder. This is the real process of how you use AI. It's not just about vibe coding and just typing in prompts and hoping for the best. That there is like a method to the madness, okay? And using these kind of processes to guide and tailor your AI to your project is what makes a difference between what people tend to call slop, something that actually works and is genuinely fun to play. Okay, and I think this is really shaping up pretty well. And the reason why it's just flickering is because right now, oh, okay, you can see it's already swapped in the portrait. So this is looking correct. And I wonder whether it's finished up now. And yeah, it's pretty much done what it needs to do. And so you can see the portraits are working fine. Let's just see if the enemy portraits are there. So you can see the enemy. And let's make sure that they're all different. Enemy 1 has a different portrait, enemy 2, and enemy 3. All right, so you can see it's pretty much done already. And now it says that the core code patches are in. It's going to do an app build to catch any errors, which is pretty important. And then it's going to do a bunch of checks. Okay. And because there are no errors, I'm not going to ask it to do any learnings. Ultimately, you can see it's working fine. And everything else is working as expected. And I'm going to have to wait because I have run out of turn. And then once again, I'm going to go here and then just spin this around. Yeah, I think this needs to, there's some logic around how this overlay wouldn't occlude the player, but it doesn't matter. I'm going to do attack, spin it around again, zoom in a little so you can see, and then just attack the enemy. Cool. All right. This, my friends, is exactly how this works. And just showed you how I implemented this feature. Fairly simple, but the exact process is the same regardless of the amount of complication that gets involved. So now let's use this exact same process to try to implement a much more complicated feature, which I'll talk about next. Okay, so now that we've got these portraits running, let's go ahead and implement something that's a little bit more complicated. So what I want to do right now is, let me just swing back to this gameplay footage of Final Fantasy Tactics. And the main thing I want to highlight here is that this game, besides having what we've already implemented, actually has cutscenes, right? So usually there's a cutscene before the match starts. And yeah, you saw that. Okay, so what we want to do is do a bit of that as well. So what I'd like to do here is you can actually take a screenshot. So I'm going to take a picture. All right. I'm going to go back into here. Okay. And whenever I'm dealing with images, I like to switch back into the GPT 5.2 high model. Okay. So I'm going to do Control V to paste the image in. And then I'm just going to take another one where it swings back here. And then you can see I'm going to take another screenshot over here. All right, and the idea here is that I'm going to switch into plan mode again. I want to implement the ability to have cutscenes in the game with speech bubbles. Attached are 2 images from Final Fantasy Tactics that serve as references. The cutscene should play shortly after the spinning intro to the map. Let's keep it fairly short for now, but configurable. We just want perhaps one of the enemies to threaten and both our characters to respond. Ending off with the enemy say, prepare to die. All right, so with that, we have like the framework of what we want to do here. And that's pretty much all we need to do, actually. These models are very strong, and you will see later on that I will switch over to Claude Code to change the dialogue. Because I find that Claude does a lot better with creative writing. Okay, so let's just kick this off. Whenever you're doing planning, you have to remember that it's better to be in high reasoning. In fact, when you're implementing, you should be using high reasoning. Why not? Especially with the additional rate limits that we have right now. All right, and so now it's done an assessment of what needs to be done, and here are some clarifying questions. Okay, so it's saying, should the cutscene dialogue advance automatically or manually? Like it be manual, so it makes it simple and it's also a better experience for people who are reading it. And then should the cutscene be skippable? Yeah, and we can just do escape to skip. And then I think that's fine. And this is the thing in case you do not know, because it says escape, end the cutscene immediately and start the battle. you can actually press tab to add some notes to say 1, but make sure that it then auto selects the first player's character as it does now. Okay, and I could have whisper float that, but I didn't because sometimes it's just easier to type. And so those were the only 2 questions that it needed in order to determine how it's going to implement this. And you can see here, it's really done a bit of thinking around the dialogue, right? So it says, Sid is going to say stand down, Katniss says we'll handle you, the enemy says prepare to die. This will keep things engaging. And this is exactly what I was saying just now. Like GPT, in a lot of ways, is really good as a model. It's a general purpose model, as a coding model, especially for Codex. But sometimes the creative writing, it follows you a little bit too closely and doesn't really think creatively, which might be what you want, especially when you're coding. So we'll fix this up with Claude shortly after. Okay. All right, so it's done the plan. Okay, so it's going to do a configurable cutscene system. And the reason why I want it to be configurable is so that I can make edits to it. I don't want to hard code it. So this is something that you should always remember. Like when you can, always make things configurable. So you can just change the text. You don't have to change the code. It's a lot better. Okay, so I use this speech bubbles. And then, yeah, I think this is pretty straightforward. So remember what we like to do. Stay in plan mode. Switch into GPT 5.3 high. And then you can do GPT 5.3 low, because all you're doing is write prompts to prompts, write plan to plans, then wait for me. Okay. Like I said, this is what I like to do so that we can always keep track of what we're working on. And while we're at it, the changes that we had previously from the portraits, it's time to check it in. Okay. So you can see these are all the changes that we have over here. And you can do this within VS Code, but most recently, so I've been using something called LazyGit. Okay, so I'm just going to jump out of Claude for a second here. Okay, and I'm just going to do LazyGit, and this is the reason why I really like it. So if you look at it here, it's pretty much the same thing as we saw earlier in VS Code, but it's just very quick, right? I can just press spacebar on the folder or on individual files to add them or stage them. And then you can see the prompts from just now. Over here, this is the portraits assets one, so I'm going to just save that one. Plans, and then this is the portraits one again. So you can see I can do individual files. And then these were all the changes from earlier. So then I just do this and I just do C for commit and I say feature portraits. And then I'm going to say implement portraits in game. And then I just press enter. And that's pretty much how I like to use LazyGit. So much faster than over here. You can also ask Claude to generate commit messages for you. I'm oftentimes moving quite quickly, and being able to just switch to my Claude Code control within the terminal is just really useful. So here you can see the prompts that I use as well as the plan. And maybe some of you might be thinking, how do I view files? You can use something called Yazi. And then you can actually open files like this, the plans that I had, and you can search. So I think this time we were saying we wanted to do T-style cutscene. So there it is. And then it opens up in Milvin, so you can preview it over here. So this is my new workflow. I'm going to be doing a full video on how I stay pretty much within Ghosty all the time. I don't really open VS Code much anymore. I'll save that for another video. I'm going to clear it, and then we're just going to start Claude again so that we can continue that later. Okay, so we saved the plan. So now we're ready to go. Let's switch back to model, Codex, Claude, and I say implement the plan. There we go. I think we'll just leave this to run and draw back when it's done. All right, so it is done now. And I'm quite excited really because I haven't actually looked at it myself. So let's switch over to how it's looking and let's see if it works. All right, so there it goes. And all right, there it goes. You should have run while you had chance. And then it says, we've come too far to back down now. Try us, we'll end this together. Prepare to die. And then it goes there. So that's pretty cool. I think what we could also do is have a bit of, something that comes up and says, battle begins, and then moves away. So let's actually try to do that. This looks great. Let's have a small modal appear saying, prepare for battle, just before the end of the cutscene and the start of the player being selected, just to give a bit more pacing. Okay, and there we go. And so that's fine. And this is one really good thing that we can then add to the learnings, right? Because this is something where it went ahead and implemented it. And to be honest, with the plan that it had, it did really well. It's been able to do exactly what I told them to do. All right. And I think that's great. Another thing that would have been really good to do, I think, would have been to zoom in on the characters, right? Because right now it is pretty static. So I'm going to do that next. Okay. You can send in commands and you can either tap the cue to message or you can send it in straight away. So this is something that if you did not know, you can do in Codex. So I'm going to do it right now because while this is going on, I want to prepare for the next thing. So I say One thing I noticed is that when the speech bubbles come up, the camera is not centering on the speaker character. Let's implement that. Okay, and then you can actually do tap to cue the message so that now it sees that it won't try to intercept and interrupt the ongoing implementation. In some cases you want to, right? Sometimes you might make a mistake or you want to clarify something. But in other cases, you just want this to continue along and move on to it once it's done. So there's another bit of a pro tip here that will allow you to do that. Okay, so you can see that this is slightly different with the tap. It actually queues the message, and so you finish this up first. All right, we can verify that this is running. And let's see if the pacing is a lot better now. So the deployment begins, all right? And then it does prepare for battle, and it does that. So that's perfect, okay? And then finally, let's jump back and see if it does the camera movement to the player. And the last thing that I want to do, and that I want to do after this, is that I want this to provide it to learning. So I'm going to queue another message and say, we've made some refinements after your initial implementation. Let's write to learnings, everything that we have learned, and then commit these changes with a good commit message. Okay, and then you can do that, and then like I said, you can press tab, and then it will only do it after it's been implemented. And it says that it's done, so let's check it out right now. Okay, so let's look. All right, so you can see that it did scroll, all right, and then it did scroll again, and then you will notice that there is a bug where the speech bubble is not actually centered. So I'm going to take a screenshot again, and maybe prematurely committed this. All right, so I'm going to paste it in, and now I'm going to interrupt it. I say, before you commit, there is a bug where the speech bubble is not aligned with this arrow on the character now. Okay, and we can interrupt it and see if we can interrupt the commit. Rather than queuing the message, it will take into account what it's just done, and then it will then take in your interruption so that before it goes ahead and commits now, because I initially did say to commit it once you've written to learnings, but now I've interrupted this, and you can see, good catch. I'll fix this by making the tail position dynamic. Okay, so this is the difference between queuing a message and trying to interrupt the agent. And this is a very useful trick that not a lot of people know about or even make use of, and this is a very good reason of why you want to do that. Okay, so while this is going on, let's do a plan mode here. So shift tab, okay, and I'm going to say, study the working state changes and recent commits. We've added a cutscene system that is configurable, but the copy and the dialogue needs work. Put on your creative thinking hat as a game designer and write a better opening. Okay, and so we're just going to do that. And because I'm in plan mode, it's not going to overwrite any of the changes. And this will just go ahead. Okay, and let's check. The tail should be following it now. So let's see if it's true. And yes, all right, so now it does follow. And yeah, so even though the tail is dynamic, but it's still getting the wrong kind of position. So I'm going to put this here again, and then try to sort this out. Occasionally, you will hit errors like this. And in a lot of cases, you want to get to the bottom of this. So what you can do is you can paste this in, and we have 42% context left. So I think that should be enough. I'm going to switch this to extra high reasoning to see if we can fix it, okay? Because sometimes these positional things and which are dynamic can be quite tricky. So I'm going to say you fix the position in terms of it being dynamic, but you will see from the image reference that the carrots are not anywhere close to the characters, especially on the vertical axis. Think about what the root cause is and fix it. And so in this case, you're going to use extra high reasoning. It's going to use more of your context, and it's going to be using more of your usage, but it might be worth it if it's going to be able to fix it. So this is a approach that you can take. Otherwise, you can also switch over to Claude Code and see if Opus 4.6 is going to be able to fix it. So that's the other point that I'm trying to demonstrate here. It's like doing any vibe coding or AI assisted coding stuff. Just make use of multiple models, right? I'm on the $20 ChatGPT plan, and I am on max right now on Claude Code, but I have downgraded. I'm on the max, not just the 5x limit. And given my usage on GPT, I've given my much increased usage on Codex. I believe at the end of this subscription cycle, I am dropping down to Pro. And it seems that it has fixed this. So let's actually just take a quick look. Yep, that looks right now. Okay. So it is getting a bit better, but it's not quite got it. So the way that you can also fix this rather than you taking screenshots is that you can use Playwright as a way to take pictures, and maybe I can give it a shot right now. Use Playwright to test it. You will need to wait a while for the rotation and the cutscene to occur, but the player's bubble is now occluding it, given its position. Okay, so it's actually kicked off. I didn't actually touch that. I was trying to do something else, but you can see it's actually kicked off. Playwright is pressed the menu button. This is all running by itself. And we're going to let the AI click through and figure out what's going on and what's the problem that it's facing. Okay, I think it's taken a screenshot, and it probably didn't think about the fact that it needs to get past the first dialogue. So it should do that. So I'll tell it. You need to skip past the enemy dialogue to get to the player. You might have actually done it. Let's take a look. No, it's still sitting on the enemy dialogue. Let's kick that in so that it will do that. Okay. All right. So you can see it is taking screenshots, and what it does is that it takes a screenshot and then it, oh, actually it did do correctly. So I'm looking at the wrong window. So you can see I was looking at the wrong window. This is my own window. I maligned it. It actually is taking pictures. So you can see here the AI is pretty smart. It might have been because of my prompt, but ultimately you can see it's taking screenshots of the intro. So you can see here enemy 1, it has taken a screenshot, give a little spine. But then when it goes to line 2, it completely occludes the character. So that's how you can use Playwright to do your testing, especially for games. There are a lot of other new browser tools that allow you to do all this, but I haven't really checked them out. Playwright has just been something that I've used in the past. It is a little bit slower. It doesn't always get things right, but it works pretty well for things like this, as you can see. All right, so while it tries to fix the issue where it's just blocking the player, so I'm just going to use Claude now to look through it. So down here is which dialogue approach do you prefer? All right, and this is the really cool thing that I like about Claude. And you can see which dialogue approach do you prefer for the opening cutscene. So you can just go through them, and it does really well at previewing it. And you can even add notes to this, but yeah, which dialogue approach do you prefer? So it says, the Margrave sends his regards. You have been too difficult to find, not difficult enough. It seems who's the Margrave, whatever you told me. So that's a pretty interesting story there. And then this one is the toll road, right? So it says, okay, the pass has a toll now, leave your supplies and walk away. So it's the front one, and then the ambush protocol, no retreat. All right, so I like the first one. All right. And I think that's one of the things about Claude's terminal user interface, or TUI, that as a harness puts it above the rest. And I think Codex will soon have this, but I really like how Claude has done this. Okay, it is completed now, and I will just quickly show you what happened. So you can see that it took a few iterations to finally get to it. So you can see, even though it fixed some reframing, and then first of all, it took a before fix. So this was erroneous. This one had an error, and then after they tried to fix it, but it still was broken. And then after they tried to anchor the view, got a little better, and they tested it, and then after they fixed it a few more times. And so now everything's working correctly now in the game. So I'll just show it to you. So I'm going to play the game. All right, and there you go. Cutscene starts. So it goes to the enemy, and it goes there, and then there. Perfect. All right, so you can see that in this case, I allowed it to fix the errors on its own because I used Playwright to test it. And it's much better than you copy and pasting and you trying to figure it out on your own. And you can see that it was able to get to it because it was able to see. So you say, I found a real issue. We anchored the tail and all that stuff. So now what we're going to do is we're going to switch back to Codex. So just medium is fine, and say add learnings to learnings, and then prompts to prompts, and then commit use changes. And let's just jump back to this. So it's now changed the cutscene. So it's going to say it's going to change the cutscene lines. But one thing I'm going to do before I do that is I'm going to say I recently made some small changes to how the dialogue speech bubbles look. So check for recent position changes and adapt to them. Because I don't want it to end up like reversing the changes that we made in order to make everything look correct. Okay, so at least that one's there. Okay, so now you can see the learnings are being written down here so that we can know what it did to fix it. And like I said again, the whole reason why I do this is that I am trying to make sure that everything I did to build this game from scratch, from the prompts that I use to the actual code, as well as the learnings and all the plans, are all captured as part of this process. And the reason is that I am intending to release a lot of these kind of resources, both for free as part of this YouTube channel, but also the main thing is part of builderpack.ai, which is where a lot of these tips and tricks and workflows and codes is going to live. So I definitely want to check it out. Link is in the description below. The full game dev resources has not been officially launched yet, but if you get the All Access Pass today, you will get hold of that as well as all my subsequent resources. So it's a one-time lifetime subscription and you get everything. I'll also be doing one on iOS app development and many other things to come. So you can do clear context and bypass permissions, but it's only used 22%, so just bypass permissions and just increment this. Okay, so you can see, instead of saying prepare for battle, it's going to do like a subtext of familiar ring, and then it's going to give names to the rest of them. And then it's quite cool, right? Like I told you, this is why Opus is a bit more creative. It gives them shadow and assassin and different things like that, but it's kept the other characters' names. All right, so it's clean compiled. This is done. So let's just take a look at the final result. Okay, so main game, and there you go. The Margave census class you've been difficult to find. Not difficult enough, it seems. And then Katniss is saying, who's the Margave? Said, what haven't you told me? Later, for now, stay at range and cover my flank. This wouldn't be a later Mudflight love you. And then there you go. All right, that, my friends, is every feature that I showed you that I wanted to do implemented in this video, showing you exactly how I work when I build games such as this. So I really hope you enjoyed today's video. Give it a like if you found it helpful and useful. Hit that subscribe button. It really helps me. And thanks to all the existing subscribers who tune in every week. And don't forget to turn on a notification bell as well, so that you'll always be the first to know when new content like this drops. And if you haven't seen my other video where I actually showed you the early version of this game built directly from my phone using the remote control features, both for Claude Code as well as Codex, definitely check out this other video over here. All right. So till next time, I'll see ya.